The Ammons family believed that something terrifying was haunting their home, and when it seemed that things couldn't get any worse, they did. Eyewitnesses to the paranormal activity included police officers, doctors, nurses, and social workers. Each of them reported witnessing things they couldn't explain. A young boy walking backward up a wall. A person lifted and thrown across a room by an invisible force. Children speaking in deep, unsettling tones with their eyes rolled back and their faces twisted into eerie grins. But that was only the beginning. This is the true story of the Ammons Family Haunting. In November 2011, Latoya Ammons moved into a modest rental home on Carolina Street in Gary, Indiana. She arrived with her 3 children and her mother, Rosa Campbell, all hoping for the fresh start they needed. Latoya's daughter was 12, while her sons were 9 and 7. At first, the house felt like a new beginning. It offered just enough space with 3 bedrooms, a basement, and a peaceful porch. But that feeling of tranquility didn't last. In December, the porch became infested with thick swarms of horseflies that crawled all over the windows. Latoya and Rosa cleared them out, but they returned the very next day. Then came the strange noises. Late at night, they began to hear slow, deliberate footsteps climbing the basement stairs, followed by the creaking of the basement door opening. Each time they checked, they found muddy footprints trailing across the kitchen floor. Eventually, they installed a lock, but that only made things worse. Now, after the footsteps thudded up the stairs, the door would also shake as if something were pounding to get out. Over the next several months, the house grew darker. Rosa saw shadow figures standing at the foot of her bed, while Latoya noticed shapes moving out of the corner of her eye. The children started acting violently, screaming in the middle of the night, throwing objects at each other, and exhibiting aggression that was entirely out of character. An oily substance began to appear on the blinds and the walls, and cold air wrapped around them at night. The family's physical health also deteriorated. Latoya began suffering from constant headaches and kidney infections, and the kids started bleeding from their noses. Despite the strange events piling up, the Ammons family did their best to move forward. On March 10, 2012, Latoya had a few friends over. At one point, she stepped away to check on the kids, who were getting ready for bed in their rooms. Suddenly she screamed, "Mama! Mama!" Rosa rushed in and found her daughter frozen in the doorway of the girl's room. Latoya was trembling and staring at her daughter, who was floating several feet above the bed. The girl's eyes were closed, her arms were at her sides, and she was completely unresponsive. Panicking, Rosa ran to her room, grabbed a bottle of holy water, and hurried back. She pressed her fingers to the girl's forehead, traced the sign of the cross, and whispered prayers. The moment the water touched the girl's skin, she gasped and dropped back down to the bed. She woke up confused and didn't remember anything. For Latoya, that moment changed everything. She began reaching out to anyone she thought could help. One clairvoyant told her that rituals had taken place in the house long ago, and they left something behind. Another medium conveyed her worst fear, that the house was infested with 200 demons, and she warned Latoya that if the family didn't leave soon, something bad surely would happen to them. However, moving wasn't an option as money was tight. They were trapped. So Latoya and Rosa followed the guidance of one of the clairvoyants and set up small altars throughout the home, especially in the basement where a patch of exposed dirt rested under the stairs. They placed a table over it, covered it with a white sheet, and arranged candles, statues, and a Bible on top. Latoya also reached out to several churches. Most of them ignored her except for one. That church suggested she thoroughly clean her house and then use anointing oil to make the sign of the cross on every door and window throughout the home. She followed their advice, and for the next 3 days, the house was silent. Unfortunately, the calm didn't last, and soon, things became worse than before. One afternoon, Rosa was in the basement doing laundry, and she felt something grab her tightly, holding on until she ran upstairs. And the youngest boy claimed that he made a new friend, a spirit named Trey, who would tell him dark things and urged him to hurt people. Shortly after, the older brother was thrown through the air from the bathroom into the hallway. Another time, Rosa walked into the kitchen and saw one of the boys floating off the ground. One night, the daughter's headboard even fell on her, causing her to get stitches. On another night, all 3 children began chanting a strange, unearthly phrase that neither Latoya nor Rosa recognized. It wasn't English, and none of them had been taught it, yet somehow they all knew it and said it together. Over the next few months, the situation deteriorated further. One night, as the daughter lay in bed, she was unable to move due to an oppressive weight pressing down on her. Then a voice whispered in her ear, "You'll be gone in 20 minutes. On another night, LaToya woke to something moving in her bedroom. When she opened her eyes, she saw a large, dark figure creeping out of the closet. When it reached the edge of her bed, it stopped and just stood there, watching her, before finally disappearing. The children then began speaking in low, growling voices, their eyes burning with rage as they stared at Rosa and LaToya, and their smiles would twist into something unrecognizable, something that didn't feel like them at all. The final night the Ammons spent together in that house was in mid-April 2012. That night, things became so bad that Rosa and LaToya had to pray over all 3 children to prevent them from being lifted into the air and then dropped to the floor. At the same time, a bottle of Febreze launched into LaToya's bedroom, crashing into a lamp. Rosa and LaToya rushed in to see what had happened, and they both froze when they saw a massive shadow figure standing in the middle of the room, watching them. LaToya and Rosa ran out. They grabbed the kids and they pulled them out the door towards the car. And as they piled into the car, LaToya realized that she left her Bible in her bedroom. Without thinking, she ran back into the house. And as soon as she stepped into the bedroom, something began to crawl from the corner of the room, slowly and deliberately emerging from the darkness. LaToya couldn't move. She stood frozen as it crept closer. The farther it moved from the shadows, the clearer it became. It was a fully formed, solid creature filled with hatred. Just as the creature drew near, LaToya felt a sudden tug on her shoulder. Rosa had come back for her, grabbing her without a word and pulling her out of the room, back through the hallway and straight to the car. The next day, the Ammons family visited their doctor in search of help. LaToya shared everything that had happened, and when the doctor turned to ask the boys a question, they answered in low, growling voices and smiled in a way that would haunt the doctor's nightmares for years. Just before he and his nurse could leave the room, the youngest son was suddenly lifted off the ground and thrown across it. The doctor screamed out, and he ran out of the room, followed closely by the nurse, who kept repeating, "Oh my God, oh my God." Shortly after that, both boys passed out and became unresponsive. A rescue was then called, and the boys were taken to a local hospital. Meanwhile, someone at the doctor's office contacted Child Protective Services. Valerie Washington was assigned to the case and headed to the hospital. As she spoke with LaToya, the youngest boy sat nearby, staring at her. When she looked into his eyes, she noticed them rolling back. Suddenly, the boy began to growl and lunged at his brother, tackling him and refusing to let go. Several adults finally managed to pull him off. A few hours later, Valerie met with the boys again, this time accompanied by a psychologist and a nurse. For several minutes, everything seemed normal. Then, without warning, the youngest brother looked over and growled. At that moment, the older brother lunged at Rosa and repeatedly smashed his head into her stomach. She eventually managed to grab his arms and hold him still. Valerie, the nurse, and the psychologist all stood frozen in disbelief. Then something unbelievable happened. As Rosa held onto the boy's wrists, he stepped backward toward the wall. He leaned forward with his feet touching the wall, and he began to walk up it backward. When his feet reached the ceiling, he jumped down behind Rosa. She released his wrists, and she stepped back, while the boy sat in a chair, staring off into space. In an official report later filed by Valerie, she wrote, "It looked like he glided across the floor, wall, and ceiling." That night, a hospital staff member contacted Father Michael Maginot to inform him about the boy's strange behavior. 3 days later, Father Maginot asked LaToya and Rosa to meet him back at the house. They gathered in the living room, sharing their experiences while sitting quietly together. As they spoke, Rosa pointed out something strange. The bathroom light kept flickering, even though no one was near the switch. Meanwhile, Father Maginot noticed the blinds in the living room beginning to sway, as if they were caught in a breeze, even though all of the windows and the doors in the house were closed. After several minutes, LaToya said she felt sick and asked Father Maginot for a blessing. As soon as he began to pray over LaToya, she started to shake, so he stopped immediately. Before he left, Father Maginot advised them to leave the house because there was a strong, dark, negative presence within it. Following his guidance, LaToya and Rosa moved in with a relative. However, less than a week later, they had to return to the house to meet with Valerie Washington from Child Protective Services. Valerie arrived with a Lake County police officer. 2 additional officers, one from Gary and the other from Hammond, joined them after hearing how strange the case had become. Father Maginot was also present. Rosa led the group into the basement. While they were down there, one officer's audio recorder, which had brand new batteries, suddenly went dead. A few minutes later, he turned it back on, and it worked perfectly. After the visit, another officer played back his recording and heard a faint voice whisper, "Hey." The officers also took photos. In one image, a cloudy white shape appeared in the upper corner of the frame. When zoomed in, it looked eerily like a face. A couple of weeks later, on May 10th, 2012, Latoya, Rosa, Father Maginot, 2 Lake County police officers, and Samantha Illick, a new case manager from the Department of Child Services, went to the house. Valerie Washington, the previous caseworker, she refused to go back. While exploring the basement, Samantha noticed a clear, oily substance seeping from the wall. She reached out and touched it and immediately pulled her hand back, feeling as if the finger had been broken. When she looked down, the skin had turned pale white, as if the blood had been drained from it. Within minutes, she struggled to breathe and her heart raced, causing her to go upstairs to recover while the rest of the group continued their search. Father Maginot believed that the source of the disturbances was beneath the basement stairs, so he suggested digging in that area. They unearthed several items buried in the dirt, including a pink press-on nail, a pair of women's underwear, 2 child-sized socks with the bottoms cut off, a red pot lid, candy wrappers, a comb, and a heavy metal bar. These items, disturbingly out of place, raised more questions about the house's history and what may have happened there. Eventually, most of the group left, leaving only Father Maginot and the 2 police officers behind. As they continued their walkthrough, one of the officers spotted something in a bedroom. It was the same oily substance Samantha had found in the basement, and it was now on the blinds. They wiped it clean with paper towels, and they left the room, and then they closed the door. About a half hour later, they returned to find that the oil had reappeared. Father Maginot now had seen enough. He believed Latoya was the target, and the presence in the house seemed to orbit around her. Sometimes it shifted into the children, but it always returned to her. He contacted the bishop and formally requested permission to perform an exorcism. That request was denied. However, he was granted approval to perform a minor exorcism, which is a lesser rite that didn't require the full church authorization, but still follows the traditional structure and prayers. Toward the end of May, Father Maginot returned to the house with Latoya, Samantha Illick, and the 2 police officers. He began by blessing the home. Then he turned his attention to Latoya, and as he spoke the words of the rite over her, Samantha felt a change in the room. It was as if a new and disturbing presence had joined them. After this, Father Maginot reached out to the bishop again, and this time, a full church-sanctioned exorcism was approved. On June 1st, Latoya arrived at Father Maginot's church for the first of what would be 3 major exorcisms. He performed the full rite, carefully following every step, but nothing dramatic happened. There were no voices and no physical reactions. But still, Father Maginot believed that the battle was not over. Before Latoya left, he handed her a crucifix and a rosary that included Benedictine medals. However, as she stepped outside the church, the rosary crumbled in her hands. During the second exorcism, Latoya thrashed around, and the more Father Maginot prayed, the more intense her movements became. By the end, she fell into a deep, heavy sleep. When she woke, she described the pain that she felt while he was praying over her, saying it felt like it came from the inside out. The final exorcism took place toward the end of June. Father Maginot had made a change this time. He performed this rite in Latin, a language that Latoya did not understand. What happened next was impossible to ignore. During the parts of the prayer that condemned the entity, Latoya's body twisted, as if the words were striking something inside her. But when the priest shifted his prayers to praise, she remained still. Eventually, like it did before, her body went quiet and she slipped into sleep. But when she woke up this time, something was different. She reported feeling lighter, as if something had finally let go. Afterward, Latoya experienced a peace that she hadn't felt in far too long. Soon, the Ammons family moved into another house, leaving the nightmare of the house on Carolina Street behind them. Reflecting on everything they endured, LaToya later said, "When you hear something like this, don't assume it's not real, because I've lived it. I know it's real." So, what do you think happened in the Ammons family home? And was LaToya really possessed? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And as always, thanks for watching Stories Beyond the Ordinary.